Hi, my name is Victoria Sparks. I'm the life skills teacher, and I am going to read a Bailey School Kids adventure. It's called Cupid Doesn't Flip Hamburgers. So feel free to grab some pens or colored pencils. Feel free to draw while I'm reading. That's what my students do when we're reading. But this is a really fun book. I really love the Bailey School Kids. I think you'll enjoy it too. Chapter 1. St. Valentine's Day. Pink lace and frills. This is girl stuff, Eddie complained, crumbling the paper valentine he was making into a wad. He glanced around the classroom to make sure his teacher, Mrs. Jeepers, wasn't watching. After all, most of the kids thought Miss Jeepers was a vampire, but didn't dare do anything to make her eyes flash green. Luckily for Eddie, Miss Jeepers was busy at the door talking to Principal Davies. Eddie eyed his target. A head full of bouncy yellow curls that was just 3 seats away. With careful aim, he let his ruined valentine soar across the aisle. Smack! It landed right in the middle of Carrie's blonde head. Bingo, Eddie mouthed when Carrie twisted around to give him a mean look. I bet you won't get a single valentine, Carrie blurted out. Unfortunately, she was so mad she forgot to whisper. The class gasped when Miss Jeepers slowly turned around and flashed her eyes at Carrie. I'm surprised to hear such a terrible insult, Miss Jeepers said in her strange Transylvanian accent. But Eddie threw... Carrie started to say. Enough, Miss Jeepers interrupted and rubbed her green brooch. Valentine's Day is a time we show people we appreciate them. You must apologize for being rude. Carrie's face turned bright red. But apologize, Miss Jeepers insisted. The rest of the class watched as Carrie faced Eddie. I'm sorry, she muttered through clenched teeth. And she turned around and stared at the half-made valentine on her own desk. Eddie smiled his sweetest smile until Miss Jeepers went back to talking with Principal Davies. Then he giggled as he pulled an eraser off his pencil and flicked it. Carrie flinched when the eraser popped her in the back of the head. But she wasn't about to turn around and get in trouble again, and Eddie knew it. Melody sat behind Eddie. You better stop it, she warned, before Miss Jeepers catches you. But Eddie was having too much fun. As long as Miss Jeepers was busy, he was going to keep it up. He was just about to send a broken crayon hurling towards Carrie when Miss Jeepers looked at the class and cleared her throat. Eddie sat up straight and smiled sweetly. It's time for us to go to the cafeteria, Miss Jeepers said. Then she smiled an odd little half smile. Today we will meet our new cook, Miss Rosenblum. Half the class groaned, but Liza raised her hand. Maybe we should give Miss Rosenblum a valentine, too. What a wonderful idea, Miss Jeepers said. Please line up and bring one of your cards. Most of the kids rushed to line up, but Eddie, Liza, and Melody, and Howie waited to be last. That was a dopey idea, Eddie told Liza. You're just mad because you didn't get any Valentine's cards made, Howie interrupted. Melody nodded. You were too busy bothering Carrie. And she's never going to forgive you, Liza added. Carrie has never been in trouble before. I don't care about her or Valentine's, Eddie said, shaking his head as they headed for the lunchroom. But I do care about my empty stomach. I'm hungry. We always have the same old slop in the cafeteria. Maybe the new cook will be different, Liza said. Eddie shook his head. This just means we'll have new slop. Eddie, you should give her a chance. She may be a really good cook, Melody said as they walked to the cafeteria. It'll be the first good cook at Bailey, Eddie said, and stopped at the entrance of the cafeteria. What in the world happened, Howie asked. Chapter 2. Explosion! It looked like a card store exploded in here, Howie said. Looking around the cafeteria, all sizes of pink, red, and white paper hearts were everywhere. The kids looked. Hearts were plastered to the walls, hanging from the ceiling, and even stuck onto the garbage cans. Melody giggled. They must have had a 4-for-1 heart sale. 5 dumb decorations for the price of 1, Eddie said. This place looks stupid. I think it's pretty, Liza said. After all, Valentine's Day is less than a week away. Eddie rolled his eyes. Valentine's Day is for 3-year-olds who don't have anything better to do. Valentine's Day is for telling people you like them, Melody told him. Or that you love them, Liza giggled. That's disgusting, Eddie said. There's nothing disgusting about love, a voice said from behind them. But you'll find that out soon enough. Eddie looked up and gulped. in front of him was the biggest, reddest dress he'd ever seen, and it was being worn by the biggest woman he'd ever seen. Almost everything about her was big and red, from her big, bright red lips to her fluffy, reddish blonde hair. Even the heart button on her aprons and her dangly earrings were big and red. Even when she grabbed Eddie's cheek, he noticed her fingernails were painted hot pink, with little white arrows on them. "You're just the cutest little thing," the woman said as she squeezed Eddie's cheeks. "I just love your red hair. What a cutie pie." So, there's the new cook, Miss Rosenblum, pinching Eddie's cheek because he's a cutie pie. "You must be Mrs. Rosenblum, the new cook," Liza said. "Welcome to Bailey Elementary." Liza held out her valentine to the big woman. "Why, thank you, sugar," Miss Rosenblum said, and gave Liza a bear hug. "I just know I'm going to love it here." "We hope so," Howie said politely. "Did you do the decorating?" "Why, yes," Miss Rosenblum blushed. "I just love Valentine's Day. But that's enough talking. Come eat." The 4 kids followed the rest of their class through the lunch line and picked up their trays. "I've never seen so much red in my life," Eddie said. Everything on their lunch tray was red. There was heart-shaped meatloaf covered with ketchup, and tomato slices in heart shapes. Each tray had a slice of red apples with a heart-shaped blob of cherry jello. There were even red straws for the milk. "I think this lady fell off the old holiday wagon before her brain was fully cooked," Eddie said when he sat down with their trays. "She's gone heart crazy." "I think it's nice," Liza said. "It sure beats tuna surprise we usually have on Mondays." "Baked bowling balls would beat that," Melody agreed after taking a bite of her jello. "This stuff may be red, but it's good." So there's the lunch tray with all the delicious heart-shaped red items. "There's nothing good about overdosing on red," Eddie said. "That new cook may need surgery to remove all these hearts, and I'm just a doctor to handle it." "Who are you?" Howie laughed. "Dr. Love?" "Dr. Melanie would be more like it," Liza said. "Don't go bothering, or Dr. Meanie would be more like it," Liza said. "Don't go bothering Miss Rosenblum. She's nice." Eddie smiled. "Why would I bother a sweet lady like her?" His 3 friends all nodded their heads yes. Eddie had a reputation for causing mischief, but none of the 4 kids noticed. Miss Rosenblum standing near them. She was touching her heart button as she smiled. Chapter 3, Love Bug. There's Prissy Carey kissing up to Miss Rosenblum, Eddie pointed as he slurped the last of his cherry jello. "No fair," Melody said. "Miss Rosenblum gave Carey a heart button and a cookie." "Carey gets everything," Liza sighed. Carrie's dad owned Bailey City Bank. Carrie was always bringing new toys to school to brag about, or something her dad had bought her. "I'll make sure she gets a hard time," Eddie said with an evil grin. He had half-empty lunch tray and headed for Carrie. Miss Rosenblum finished pinning buttons on Carrie and spun her around to face Eddie. "Why, hello, Eddie," Carrie said, with a mouthful of cookie. "Fancy meeting you here." "Yeah, it's a miracle," Eddie said. "Would you like my apple slices?" "I'd love it," Carrie said, snapping it off Eddie's tray. "But then I'd adore anything of yours." She batted her eyes at Eddie before nibbling on the apple. Eddie gave her a funny look, then rushed back to his seat. "I can't believe you gave Carrie your apple," Melody said. "I thought you hated her." "I can't stand her," Eddie agreed. "I dropped it on the floor, that's why I gave it to her." "That wasn't very nice," Liza said. "Speaking of nice, do you see the way Carrie keeps looking at you?" Howie asked. The 4 kids turned to see Carrie, tossing her blonde hair and fluttering her eyebrows in that direction. So, Eddie giving Carrie the apple slice he dropped on the floor, and Miss Rosenblum looking all happy. Melody giggled. "I think she's been bitten by the love bug." "You guys are crazy," Eddie shook his head and looked at Carrie. She smiled and blew him a kiss. Eddie splashed through a mud puddle on his way across the playground the next morning. Melody, Liza, and Howie were huddled together under a huge oak tree, comparing answers to their math homework. "Number 13 has to be 342 hearts," Melody was explaining. Howie shook his head. "You weren't supposed to add. You should have subtracted." Liza frowned. "I multiplied." What did you get for an answer, Eddie?" Eddie looked at his friends like they'd just sprouted broccoli out of their ears. "What homework?" Melody rolled her eyes. "You'll never make it out of 3rd grade unless you do your homework." "I'll help you," a sweet voice intervened. The 4 friends turned to face Carrie. She winked at Eddie. "I have all the answers, and mine are always right." Eddie kicked his foot in the mud, splatting Carrie's pink boots with brown goo. I don't need any help, he said, especially from you. Then he stomped towards school. But I don't mind helping you, Carrie insisted as she grabbed his elbow. I brought you something, too. Eddie skidded to a stop. You're trying to get me back for yesterday's paper wad. You'd give me the wrong answers just to get me in trouble. Don't be silly, Carrie said, batting her eyelashes. Here's this, to prove I'm not mad at you. She reached inside her book bag and pulled out a red rose. I even snipped the thorns off so you don't get pricked. Eddie backed away and bumped into Melody. It's not every day a guy gets flowers from his girlfriend, Melody said with a giggle. Carrie's not my girlfriend, Eddie yelled as he ran into school. Carrie sighed and flipped her golden curls behind her ears. Poor Eddie. I'll just have to try harder. Try harder? To do what? Liza asked from behind Melody. Carrie looked at Melody, Howie, and Liza as if she were going to tell them the answers to next week's scientists. But she shook her head and followed Eddie into school. Never mind. You just wouldn't understand. Something strange is going on at Bailey Elementary, Melody said. Howie nodded. I never dreamed I'd see the day when Carrie was nice to Eddie. It's almost like she's in love with him, Liza said softly. Don't be silly, Melody said. Godzilla is more lovable than Eddie. The three friends nodded and went inside the school building. Once inside, the kids stopped dead in their tracks. Maybe Liza was right, Howie said. Melody started laughing so hard she snorted through her nose. It looks like Carrie has Eddie cornered. Sure enough, Carrie had grabbed Eddie's notebook at the water fountain. I'd love to carry your book, she was telling him. Eddie tugged as hard as he could, but Carrie wouldn't let go. Give it to me. Eddie jerked his notebook one last time, tearing the cover in half. Now look what you've done, Eddie yelled. I'm sorry, Carrie said. I'll get you a new one. Eddie gave her a look and dashed into the classroom. Melody, Howie, and Liza followed and started teasing Eddie. It looks like Carrie's fallen for you, Howie whispered. Eddie took a pencil out of his desk and shook his head. She's just trying to make me mad. It looks like love to me, Melody nodded towards the doorway. Carrie stood there, straightening the heart pin on her sweater. Then she strode towards Eddie and paused behind the desk. She smiled and put a chocolate kiss on his desk. She winked and walked to her own desk. From behind, Eddie heard Melody giggle and started singing, Eddie and Carrie sitting in a tree, Kissing. First comes love. But before she could sing anymore, Eddie took the candy kiss and flung it over his shoulder. It landed with a definite thunk on Melody's forehead. All right, that is the end of chapter 3. You'll have to come back